So I've given you my top 10 list for the finest Best Picture Oscar lineups of all time. In this video, we are talking about the worst. Hey guys, it's Brian. Welcome to the awards contender. So this is going to be a fun one. In nearly 100 years of the Academy Awards, what do I think were some truly awful Best Picture Oscar lineups? I'm not talking about necessarily what won, there could be a good movie that won, but then let's look at the other nominees that year in Best Picture and decide, okay, especially considering some truly great films that might have come out that year, this is the lineup you gave us? These were the 5 or more best films you could come up with, Academy? Come on. So yeah, going through the decades, it wasn't too difficult to come up with 10 years I wish would have gone differently in Best Picture. Let's start with number 10, 2008. The winner of Best Picture that year was Slumdog Millionaire, and the other nominees were The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Frost Nixon, Milk, and The Reader. The Reader. I can still remember that moment. I watched that live on Oscar nominations morning, and when they said The Reader, I was like, what? I can't be the only one that morning in early 2009, waiting for that Best Picture nomination for The Dark Knight. That was my choice for the best film of the year. And it was a huge blockbuster, a critical darling. I was like, if any superhero movie could get into Best Picture at the Oscars, it was gonna be that one, right? It had to happen. And it's there was room there. And instead of The Dark Knight, the Academy went with The Reader. I was like, what? I was just so disappointed. For days, I was like, ugh, really? So, okay, this might not be one of the 10 worst Best Picture lineups, right? In this category, you have Slumdog Millionaire, which is a great film. That was on my top 10 list. You also have Milk, which was on my top 10 list, and I really, really love that film. I don't have too many opinions on The Curious Case of Benjamin Button and Frost Nixon. Those are fine. Did they have to get into Best Picture? Not really. They were. I think I gave them 3 stars. They were okay. The reason this is in my list here today is because of The Reader taking a slot that should have gone to The Dark Knight, and it was such a controversy at the time that the Academy the following year decided to implement their 10 nominees in Best Picture instead of 5. In the early days of the Academy Awards, not every year, but most of the first 20 years or so of the Oscars, you have 10 nominees in Best Picture. They did away with that by the end of the 40s, and then for decades, it's always 5 nominees. But after The Dark Knight failed to secure that Best Picture nomination at the Oscars, they decided to go to 10, so the next year, you could have a film like District 9 get in. The Blind Side could get in. 2009, there might be a couple quibbles in that lineup, but it's a much, much better lineup than 2008. The Reader should not be there. The Dark Knight should have gotten into Best Picture. Number 9, 1943. The winner that year was Casablanca, a good win. I'll talk about it, of course. But the other nominees that year, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Heaven Can Wait, The Human Comedy, In Which We Serve, Madame Curie, The More the Merrier, The Oxbow Incident, The Song of Bernadette, and Watch on the Rhine. Okay, so the winner for that year is a great one. It's an all-timer. It's Casablanca. So why would I have this year for Best Picture in my list for the worst lineups ever? Because after Casablanca, there's not much. The Oxbow Incident, I watched that once. It was pretty solid with Henry Fonda. For Whom the Bell Tolls with Ingrid Bergman, which she got nominated for at the Oscars that year, by the way, not Casablanca. That was pretty silly. And I tried to watch that movie once, and it's fine. Heaven Can Wait is pretty good. That's a pretty famous comedy from the 40s, but The Human Comedy, In Which We Serve, Madame Curie, The More the Merrier, Watch on the Rhine. It's, you know, it's like, are we talking about these movies very much nowadays? I just feel like, yeah, like it's got a great winner that year in Casablanca, but the rest of the movies, I don't think are anything spectacular, memorable. I mean, the Song of Bernadette, I mean, like, that's kind of well known. And, like, you could flirt with putting 1943 a little bit outside this list. I just, going through the decades and the years, I was looking through, like, okay, well, what lost to Casablanca? And it's like, oh, well, you know, obviously that movie is very famous and a very well-deserving winner for Best Picture. I'm so happy it won. Like in my video, the top 10 Best Picture Oscar wins of all time, of course, Casablanca is there. But it's like, okay, well, what could have beaten Casablanca? Nothing. like clearly nothing. There is not one film in that category of 10 titles that I'm like, well, you know, if Casablanca wasn't there, maybe it could go to, like, I guess the Song of Bernadette? Like, maybe? I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of a womp lineup once you get beyond Casablanca. Number 8, 1954. The winner that year was another great one, On the Waterfront. The other nominees were The Cane Mutiny, The Country Girl, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, and 3 Coins in the Fountain. So like my choice for number 9, here's the Best Picture category at the Oscars that has a phenomenal winner. The Cane Mutiny is also a terrific film. So we've got 2 pretty good movies there, but then you get to the other 3 and it's like, oh my god. I mean, I know there are fans of Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. You know, I might get some flack for this one because I feel like there are fans of that one, you know. But I watched it once, you know, it was fine. I was like, okay. And then 3 Coins in the Fountain. I mean, that's like very old-fashioned, like, you know, very much of its time. And The Country Girl, you know, it's remembered as the film that won Grace Kelly Best Actress at the Oscars over Judy Garland for A Star Is Born. And, you know, there was a video I made once where I went to bat for her. I said, you know, that's not a terrible win because she was also in 1954 in 2 Alfred Hitchcock movies, Dial M for Murder and Rear Window, of course. Like, she's so freaking great in Rear Window. So I guess part of me is like, well, let's just pretend she won for that. I don't know. But like, 1954, where is Rear Window? Why is Rear Window not nominated for Best Picture? It got into Director for Hitchcock at the Oscars, but it's not in Picture, so that's really weird. And so I just feel like once you go beyond On the Waterfront and The Cane Mutiny, it's just, it's not the best lineup I've seen. Number 7, 1955. So now we're jumping ahead just one more year. The winner for that year was Marty, and the other nominees were Love is a Mini Splendor Thing, Mr. Roberts, Picnic, and The Rose Tattoo. So here's another kind of shrug-worthy lineup, you know, it's like, well, Marty's a very fine film. It's kind of cool that won Best Picture. It's kind of a smaller movie of the 50s. It's not like big and glossy and Technicolor and all of those things. It's a very affecting personal story, so that's cool that it won. But like, really, that's the best we could do in 1955? I mean, Love is a Mini Splendor Thing. Like, okay, that's Best Picture nominee. I watched Mr. Roberts once and did not care for it. Like, John Ford, Henry Fonda, a good cast. Jack Lemmon's good in that movie, but like, I don't think that's Best Picture material. The other 2 movies here, like Picnic I watched once, it was okay. But like, after Marty, there's nothing here to get excited about, I think. Like, it's like, you know, I've talked about on the channel a lot how the 1950s is my least favorite decade for cinema. You know, there's some great stuff there. Hitchcock is my favorite director, and that was kind of his landmark decade. It's not a complete waste of time or anything. There are, of course, some wonderful films there. My favorite movie of all time is Sunset Boulevard, and that's technically a 50s film. It came out in 1950, so I think there was kind of a stale quality to a lot of like the big studio films of that decade. And I do think that is reflected in a lot of these Best Picture Oscar lineups. Number 6, 2011. Okay, let's go forward in time. Let's go to a little bit more of the modern era. Now, once after The Dark Knight didn't get into Best Picture, and then they, increased the number of nominees in picture to 10, and then some years after that, it wasn't necessarily just a set 10. It was like, it can be between, I think, 5 and 9 or something. That was really weird. So 2011 coming off of 2010, which I do think is one of like the top 5 Best Picture Oscar lineups of all time. That is a frickin' phenomenal lineup. You get to the next year, 2011, and there's really, to be completely honest, not one movie in that lineup that excites me, that makes me want to put it on again. I mean, there's some decent movies here, but I don't know. The winner for 2011 at the Oscars was The Artist. The other nominees were The Descendants, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, The Help, Hugo, Midnight in Paris, Moneyball, The Tree of Life, and War Horse. Yeah, I mean, I'm just like, if I had to watch one of those again, it would probably be Hugo. I think that's the best movie there. I also really appreciate The Tree of Life. That's not really a film I want to watch every 6 months. That was a very singular experience watching that in the theaters opening weekend. But in the 2010s of the Oscars, those Best Picture lineups are pretty solid. I was looking at 2014, you've got The Theory of Everything, and you have The Imitation Game, and some safe kind of titles there. But then you also have a Whiplash, and so everything's okay. Boyhood, things like that. 2011, I mean, maybe it's not one of the 10 worst lineups ever, but I just don't think there's anything truly spectacular there. And you do have a few duds. I would say the biggest one is Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. That was just silly. That was so stupid, nominating that for Best Picture. I made a video once, I think it was the worst Best Picture Oscar nominations of the 2010s, maybe, something like that. And I do think I picked Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, at number 1 for that decade. That was a really stupid nomination. War Horse also is kind of not one of Spielberg's best. I mean, there's things about that film I appreciate, the cinematography and certain things, but that's not a movie I think about anymore. I think most people have kind of moved on from War Horse. And, Moneyball is solid. Midnight in Paris, fine, I guess. The Help, it was entertaining enough at the time. I do think that movie has been a little problematic in the years that have passed. So, yeah, 2011, there's some decent films there. The Descendants is very good with George Clooney. But especially, I would say, of the last 20 years, this one is pretty low on the list. I mean, we could have had Drive. We could have had Shame. We could have had some really exciting titles make that list for Best Picture that year. And instead they go with Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. No. Sorry, 2011, but you make this list. Number 5, 1931 to 1932. So the winner that year was Grand Hotel. The other nominees were Aerosmith, Bad Girl, The Champ, 5-Star Final, 1 Hour with You, Shanghai Express, and The Smiling Lieutenants. Okay, so I think it's kind of obvious why this makes the list. Outside of Grand Hotel and maybe The Champ, are we talking at all about any of these other films? I mean, you go through the 1930s, in Best Picture at the Oscars, typically every year that decade, there are 4, maybe 5 movies in the Best Picture lineup that we're not really familiar with today, unless you're a huge film nerd, Oscar nerd, and know your stuff. I have researched a lot of these early years of the Oscars for some videos I've made for the channel, and I've looked at some of these films, and boy, I mean, they are hard to get through. They are really stale, poor quality at times if it's not a very famous film from the 30s. But, the next year you have, I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. You have Little Women with Katharine Hepburn. you've got like a few really great films. And most of these years, there's like 3 or 4 that I'm like, okay, like those are terrific nominations, so that doesn't make this list. But you look at the year Grand Hotel won, you can ask yourself, okay, Grand Hotel is very famous for being the only movie in Oscars history to get 1 nomination for Best Picture and win. Like it won Best Picture without being nominated anywhere else. Nothing in the acting categories, nothing in director, nothing in screenplay. It won Best Picture with just that lone nomination that will never happen again, you know? Like that was a one-time thing. But then you're like, okay, well, how did that happen? Because the other films in the category were kind of clunkers. Sorry, like there's nothing really that exciting here. There's nothing we're talking about now. The Champ, I have watched, and that's pretty good. But I wouldn't call that a terrific film. Like it's solid. And then most of these others are just kind of shrug-worthy. I mean, it's hard, right, to compare the films of the 30s to like the films of now, you know? Like who am I to say this lineup from almost 100 years ago is one of the worst in Oscars history? So if you feel like 1931 and 1932, the year Grand Hotel won, is like a freaking fantastic Best Picture Oscar lineup, you know, tell me in the comments. Like, be like, Brian, you're wrong. Like, go watch each of these movies in full and you will realize that was the best lineup ever, you know. But yeah, I think this has to be considered one of the weaker Best Picture lineups. Number 4, 1963. So in this video, I don't have any Best Picture years from the 1970s or the 1980s, and like the 60s almost got out unscathed. But like you look at that 1963 lineup and it's it's kind of rough. The winner that year was Tom Jones, and the other nominees were America, America, Cleopatra, How the West Was Won, and Lilies of the Fields. Yeah, I was like, when I saw that lineup a few hours ago, I was like, oh, that's in the top 5. That's in the top 5 worst lineups. There's nothing there I really care for. I watched Tom Jones once, the winner, and I mean, it's not one of the 10 worst Best Picture wins of all time, but it might be in the next 10, you know? It's okay. Like Albert Finney does a good job in that movie, but it's not one of the better picture wins at the Oscars. And then Cleopatra is not a very good movie. I'm more interested in the making of that movie. I remember the DVD I used to have when I was younger. It had like a 2-hour documentary about all of the problems and trials and tribulations, the absolute chaos that went on during the making of that film. It's so much more interesting than that 4-hour epic movie itself. And I'm actually kind of surprised it got into Best Picture. I didn't think it was well liked at the time, so I'm like, it's kind of amazing to me it got into picture. And then I did a year of James Stewart recently, watching all of his appearances in movies. So I finally watched How the West Was Won. And like, maybe, you know, it was fun to watch for audiences back in the 60s, but that was a slog of a movie. You know, it just went on and on and on and on. And, you know, it had some decent cinematography. The way that movie was made, also like Cleopatra, kind of interesting, but not really successful as a narrative. Lilies of the Field has a really outstanding performance by Sidney Poitier, who of course won the Oscar that year for Best Actor. But like, you know, as a movie, it's fine. So yeah, I'm just like, there's not a movie in this category I can really go to bat for. You know, there's not one really outstanding film. They're not like terrible necessarily. Like Cleopatra, I can watch that. It's you know, it's not a horrific movie or anything. But like, that's the best we could do in 1963. Those were the 5 best movies that year. I can't imagine that's true, right? So yeah, I think if you're looking at really terrible Best Picture Oscar lineups, you have to include 1963. Number 3, 2020. The winner that year was Nomadland, and the other nominees were The Father, Judas and the Black Messiah, Mank, Minari, Promising Young Woman, Sound of Metal, and The Trial of the Chicago 7. Okay, I might get some flack for this one. Like some of you are like, what? What is wrong with you? What are you talking about? But yeah, I was not much of a fan of that year in cinema. Of course, that was a weird year. The COVID year. We weren't going to theaters. We were watching everything streaming and things. And so you didn't really have that cinema experience that year. Maybe that factors into this placements. Now, there are some good films in this lineup. Nomadland, the winner, made my top 10 list. And so did Promising Young Woman. But I haven't had any desire in the years since to revisit either of those movies. And then I thought some of these titles were very overrated at the time. Mank is probably my least favorite David Fincher movie. Like I was so let down by that. I had been excited to see Mank for weeks, and then I watched it on Netflix and I'm like, from the beginning of that movie, it wasn't working on a narrative level, emotional level. I like the cinematography and things, but yeah, I don't really care for that. Minari is very beloved, but I did not really care for that either. Like, some of it was okay, but I thought that was overrated. Sound of Metal was good, but again, I didn't think it was like Best Picture worthy. And The Trial of the Chicago 7, that one SAG ensemble, and I could barely get through it. I did not take to that film at all. Judas and the Black Messiah, that was okay. The Father is very good, but it's a hard watch. I wouldn't want to look at that movie again. I don't think I'll ever sit through it. So yeah, it's not that these are all terrible films. There's fans of Minari, there's big fans of Sound of Metal, and it was an interesting year in that because we weren't getting a lot of big studio product that year, the Oscars reflected that in a lot of indie films showing up in Best Picture. But I think compared to the last few years, after 2020, the lineups have been much better, especially in the last 2 years, I would say. And so when I was going through the list this morning, looking at the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and then the 2020s, I got to 2020 and I was like, ugh. I was like, no. There is not a film in that lineup I would necessarily want to put on right now. Whereas pretty much every other year in Best Picture at the Oscars I looked at, there's usually one movie I really, really take to and could put on at a moment's notice, with excitement. I guess if I had to watch something from that lineup for 2020, it would be Promising Young Woman. But I do think that is a film that was better at the time on its first watch. And then seeing what happens in the last 20 minutes, I don't think that would work very well on a rewatch. So yeah, come at me if you think I'm all wrong here, that the 2020 Best Picture lineup is a great one. Some of you might feel that way. I never have, and I'm voicing that opinion right now. Number 2, 1999. The winner that year was American Beauty, and the other nominees were The Cider House Rules, The Green Mile, The Insider, and The Sixth Sense. Okay, this one might shock you. This one you might be like, what? What is wrong with you, Brian? Are you okay? Are you okay today? I spent a whole year on my YouTube channel celebrating the films of 1999. That is my favorite year in cinema. So why do I have this lineup at number 2? Because it does not reflect in any way that year of movies that was 1999. So many big swings, so many wonderful films in a variety of genres, all throughout that year. And you get to Best Picture in early 2000, and those are the 5 films they went with? Really? Of course, these are not all stinkers. American Beauty hasn't aged very well, but that's a very good film in a lot of ways. The Sixth Sense is outstanding. That's a really cool nomination for Best Picture. I take no issue with that. The Insider is also pretty good. I don't know if I would have nominated it for Best Picture of the Year, but it's pretty solid. But I think most of you would probably agree. In that landmark year in film, did we have to nominate at the Oscars in Best Picture The Green Mile and The Cider House Rules? especially The Cider House Rules. I mean, it could have been worse. That could have won, like, director and picture. You know, it was a Harvey Weinstein, like, Miramax movie. Like, I mean, we could have gotten close to that happening. I mean, that would have been worse. At least American Beauty won. Like, at least that happened. I much prefer that win than if The Cider House Rules had taken it. But in a year where you have films like The Matrix, and Election, and Eyes Wide Shut, and Being John Malkovich, and Three Kings, and Magnolia, and The Blair Witch Project. I could go on and on and on and on. It's like at the Oscars, really? We went with The Green Mile and The Cider House Rules to reflect that year in film. It has never felt right to me. It felt wrong on Oscar nominations morning when I was in high school watching that back. In that moment, I was like, The Cider House Rules? Like, really? Okay. And then in the years, decades that have passed, it looks really odd. At least Spike Jonze, for Being John Malkovich, got into director. Like, that was cool. Like, we couldn't get Being John Malkovich in Best Picture? Like, if that was here, let's say, instead of The Cider House Rules or The Green Mile, then we'd be okay. Like, then this category wouldn't be in this list. But it's just so safe, really. Filmmakers were doing so many great, like, awe-inspiring things that year. And if you weren't alive in 99, and if you were just looking at the Best Picture lineups of the last 30, 40 years, whatever, you would look at 1999 and you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know how exciting that year was for movie lovers. I mean, it was every weekend, every single weekend, there was something really cool and fresh to see. It didn't matter if it was a comedy or a drama or a horror film or whatever. It was just, you never knew what to expect weekend after weekend that entire year. And this Best Picture Oscar lineup does not reflect that. And that's why in this video, it's my number 2 choice. And finally, that takes me to my number 1 choice. What do I think is the worst Best Picture Oscar lineup in history? We go back again to the 1930s. I think most of you will agree with me on this one. My number 1 choice is 1930 to 1931. The winner that year was Cimarron, and the other nominees were East Lynne, The Front Page, Skippy, and Trader Horn. Yeah. Like, that's the worst one, right? That's the worst Best Picture Oscar lineup in Academy Awards history. The 4th ceremony, we have, like, if not the worst Best Picture Oscar win ever, it's definitely in the top 3, I would say. Cimarron, which is like, I mean, it is a dare. It is a dare to try to finish that movie now. It is so dull, it just plods along. You know, those early days of the sound era, they didn't really know like how to put this thing together. I mean, some directors did. All Quiet on the Western Front, the movie that won Best Picture at the Oscars the year before by Universal Pictures, like, that's a great movie, a war film that still, like, works well today. But the next year you have Cimarron, and it's like, oh my God. I mean, I made a video about this ceremony and that film, and it was tough. I was like, Brian, we're making an entire video about Cimarron. We have to watch it. And I mean, I think I split it up into 2 sittings. I was really struggling. So, I mean, first off, that's a terrible win. And then you have the other 4 nominees, and there's just nothing there. Like, Skippy is probably the best of those. Like, it's okay. You know, it's decent. The Front Page, you know, about journalism, you could say that one's fine. But like East Lynne, no. Trader Horn, like, people died on the set making that movie. And the finished product is nothing to write home about. So yeah, there's nothing here that's really very good. And then you have Cimarron winning, you know, just one of the worst movies ever to take the top prize, like, as a victory. I mean, there's other years in the 1930s, like I've talked about one in this video, that don't have the greatest Best Picture lineups. You know, there's a couple years I've talked about in the 50s. You have a few modern years that, could have been better, could have had at least 2 or 3 better films in the lineup. But you go back to the early years of the Academy Awards, and there are some cringy, creaky, difficult movies there to get through. And I do think 1930 to 1931 is the worst. It's the worst one. I mean, I would not want to spend a weekend watching those 5 Best Picture contenders. I mean, Cimarron. Oh my God. Cimarron. I feel like if the other 4 movies in this category were really good, I would still have 1930 to 1931 in this video, because Cimarron won, and it's geez, how bad were the other movies there? Pretty bad. There's nothing really that good here. It's really a weak year at the Oscars. So 1930 to 1931, the 4th Academy Awards ceremony, where Cimarron took the top prize for Best Picture. I do think in the long history of the Academy Awards, going all the way back to the late 1920s, this has to be considered the very worst Best Picture Oscar lineup in history. Thanks so much for watching and subscribing, and let me know in the comments below, what do you think are some of the worst Best Picture lineups ever, and I'll see you next time at the Awards Contender.